All right, so we are going to have a special episode next Thursday as part of the Beloit College Community Day. And as of our taping right now, 4 o'clock on Wednesday, April 8th, we do not know what time because we have invited some alumni who are working in healthcare situations or in public health situations. And then some alumni spread around the world. We're trying to find a time where we can get the most of them together with us. So we'll have an idea before Monday though, for sure. So, and with that, should we get started?
Yes. So welcome everyone to Let's Talk Coronavirus. We are your host. My name is Ron Watson. I am here as one of the resident faculty in Health and Society and Political Science. And this, of course, is Rachel. Take it away, Rachel.
I'm Rachel Bergstrom, and I'm an associate professor of biology, and I also teach in the Health and Society program. Most notably, I teach emerging diseases, and I'm teaching that this semester, and it has been wild. It's been coronavirus all the time. So today we have two guests with us to talk a little bit about to take a different approach to understanding the outbreak. We've got Pablo. Pablo, go ahead and introduce yourself. You have to talk.
Hi, yes, I'm Pablo Toral. I thank you for inviting me today. I teach environmental studies and international relations.
All right, great. And then second, we have Tara. Tara, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Tara Girard. I'm the director of the Health and Wellness Center at the college and a nurse by education. And I have been listening to this webinar every episode, I think. So happy to feel ready to speak, I guess, as needed today.
Yay.
Great. And so I guess we always start out reminding ourselves that we're human. So how are you doing? What's keeping you sane these days, Ron?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing, right? I have been putting on some quarantine pounds, right, by making some really good food. That's to me one of the most important things. And as I talked about before, many of you know that I am a cocktail aficionado, so I've been making a variety of different quarantinis, trying to try those out. And Tara's smiling because we had a virtual happy hour where I shared that recipe with the other Health and Healing Channel folks. So yeah, just doing that, hanging out with my toddler and my other kids, and playing some games every now and again when I get the time. But you know, time is in short supply. You all know I'm working harder now than I did before. This is crazy. How's this possible? At any rate, how about you, Rich?
It's insane, like the amount of time that, I mean, teaching the same class online, anyhow, it blows my mind how much time is going into this transition, but I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it, though, and I know the
exactly. I mean, I'm not really complaining. I love what I do, so. It's
just surprising. So I'm also, I'm coming now to have a different appreciation, a better appreciation of being home all the time with the toddler, who now can identify her elbows. So,
nice.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And most recently, I've been sewing masks. So, you know, got those for, I'm not going anywhere to wear them, but, you know, I'm sewing them. So that's keeping me busy. So Tara and Pablo, what are you up to these days? Go ahead, Tara.
So I'm one of the few people who are still on campus, as you can see by me being in the powerhouse. And so I think that has been, I've really been grateful to be on campus. I like the normalcy of working and getting up and doing normal things and going to work. So that's been really good for me. Exercise has been a giant crutch for me, which is great because it's helping avoid the quarantine pounds from the cocktails and mixology and lots of cooking and baking going on in my house with my 3 teenagers at home too.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing for me that I think we'll talk about mental health later, but is really I had a tough time last week and probably a little bit the week before. And really had to make myself start doing stuff and like doing normal stuff that I do. And, you know, we started a fact staff student book club with a small group of people and just really trying to like think about what can we do? How can we pivot programming and do things that are kind of the normal things we do, but do that little shift. So kind of pulling myself out of my own abyss by reaching out to others and trying to do fun stuff.
Oh, I think that that's key because I had the same experience. That last week was the week where I was like, anyhow, yeah. So Pablo, what have you been up to?
Well, I think I have very little to add to what has been said. It seems like we all do similar things other than work, which is absolutely overwhelming for a number of reasons. I mean, having to help students make arrangements to fly home, to make sure they keep up with work while or after they come out of quarantine. All of that has been incredibly emotionally draining in a way because, you know, students are under a lot of stress, and that in a way is actually, you know, contagious, I think. So that has been taking a lot of time. And one of the things that has kept me very, very busy in a positive way has actually surprised me is, you know, the extensive network of friends that I have around the world. I've got friends pretty much wherever the pandemic is actually ground zero. I mean, New York, you know, Madrid, Italy, Northern Italy, and also in South America. So, and many of them are people that I know from grad school. So they share the same passion for research methods, which is kind of like frivolous at this point that, you know, we're actually really looking statistics, interpreting data, looking for all kinds. I mean, if you think about all kinds of mistakes that you can make while collecting data, while analyzing data, you got so many examples. So that is actually been fun in a way. And I think maybe I'm losing it, that I'm actually enjoying, you know, these kinds of discussions about research methods, but I really do. But it is really time consuming. So, but anyway, you have to, you know, make the most out of a difficult situation. And I think, you know, I'm learning a lot along the way about pandemics, which is something that I taught a little bit about in my courses, but only as far as, you know, we think about pandemics in international relations. And this is, in a way, making it real in a way that most of us probably don't expect, you know, especially those difficult things that, you know, we bring up. So here's what happens when there is a problem like this somewhere in the world. Well, little did you know that the problem somewhere in the world was actually in Beloit. So all of that has really blurred the lines between personal, professional, teaching lives in many different ways. But I think we'll come out stronger, smarter, knowing more, learning from mistakes that we make, and probably make many. But it's interesting, and glad to see so many of you, you know, joining in, sharing the same passion.
Yeah. Well, and so we'd be interested to hear, our structure is usually that we rely heavily on the chat. There's two of us, and so we keep track of what's going on in there, and we'd like to highlight how you're keeping yourself sane. I think we are definitely going to be talking about mental health in this episode because I think what I'm hearing is a very similar pattern from a lot of people, that in the first few weeks, it was just kind of like, we're on adrenaline, we're going to make this happen. It's going to happen. And then something changed in the past few days or last week, where people are like, oh, this is real, and this is happening, and this isn't changing anytime soon. And so perhaps the best place to start would be to talk with Tara a little bit about your perspective on that as a nurse and as the director of the Health and Wellness Center on campus. How are you thinking about mental health, especially for our students, staff, and faculty, as they're spread across the globe?
Yeah, I think you brought up a lot of really good points. One that I definitely experienced, and I know I'm not alone, of that, like, go. It was like, you know, all of a sudden we hit this wall of reality of what's going on. And I think we didn't only hit that individually, but the entire world hit it. And so there was this in some ways this weird thing of how do you find your support systems and reach out to people when everyone is suffering and everyone is trying to figure this out. And just the ideas to me that have been helpful from a normalizing standpoint is that none of us have done this before. There is no frame of reference. There is no, guidelines for how we do this. Our parents don't know, our grandparents don't know, our teachers don't know. No one really knows how we move through this. And so I think recognizing that knowing that we're all trying to figure this out for the first time, and we're not supposed to know how to do this well, and we're not supposed to know how to do this right, that was helpful for me from a normalizing standpoint. And I've been sharing that with a lot of people. It's a first time for all of us. And I think, Rachel, you less so maybe than me and Ron, but I mean, we all have life experience. And I think when you have a little bit less life experience, it makes that even harder too. So that was one thing. The other thing is, this is a marathon. Rachel, also what you said at the beginning, like, this is not a sprint. I personally am still feeling very reliant on May and being able to turn around and look back at April and go, this is better. Like 2 weeks ago, this was worse. And so this is a good thing, but this is a marathon. And I think that's evident to everyone from the plans that we're making for the future and all of that. Last thing.
Oh, sorry. I have a follow-up question to what you just said, because I think this, and hold your other thought, of course, but what is it that's giving you, when you say that you're looking forward to May, and being able to look back on April, how are you thinking about that? Are you looking at the models that you see from public health, or is that just the college year is kind of done and things are different in the summer? Is it some combination? How are you thinking about that?
It's mostly from predictive models. When I'm looking on like healthdata.org is one that I like, the COVID-19 healthdata.org. I like their predictive models. And actually even looking at their models from last week as compared to this week, the situation that they're describing in Wisconsin specifically has changed for the positive in a pretty dramatic way. So partially it's that. I partially too realize that I have to have some hope. I have to believe that things are going to get better, and I can't look too far down the road. So it's kind of a blending of all of those things, less about the academic year. And let's face it, May is always better than April. April's always better than March. May is always better than April, for sure.
Yeah.
But I really, really like predictive models. I have a couple listservs that I'm on that look at daily snapshots of the entire United States. And then I like the Health Data site for their predictive models for how they're looking at peaks and how they're looking at getting over humps and where things are going to be in August, for example. So all of that I find really, really helpful. I like data and I like facts. I like kind of putting the story on top of it. And then the last thing that I was going to say is that thinking about the falling apart thing, something that I realized this week that was great is I fell apart last week. I feel a lot better this week. But now I'm finding that all the people who helped me last week, I'm able to help this week. Yeah. So I think, we're all coming in and out. And so take that care, if anyone out there is hitting their lull and hitting their low point, talk to your friends about it, talk to people about it, and take that care from people, because you're going to come out of it and then you'll be ready to help them when they're going into it. Because I think it's hitting all of us at different times and in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really important point, Tara. This is what I've been talking to some students and some of my folks in my friend circle about as well, right? I mean, it is hitting people at different times. I think I was maybe last week was in the grocery store, and there was something about how the people around me were sort of scurrying that really made me go, whoa. Like I just sort of stopped for a second. And at the same time, I mean, as you rightly pointed out, I mean, none of the folks that we could rely on for wisdom are able to help us here, right? That we haven't had something quite like this in living memory. But I also think that that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to, which is that as we come out on the other side, this is an experience that as a society, as a global society even, is something that we will have gone through together. And one of the beautiful things that's emerging for me too is just seeing how we are using the technology to like reach out to one another in ways that we would not have done before. And it's also forced people who did not use the technology to suddenly use it, right? I told students this morning about a story with one of our relatives who's 87, and for his birthday, he had basically his entire family on the screen, and he just kept remarking about that, right, as we talked to him, and we realized he was blown away because he's had birthdays before, but his family's all across Wisconsin and all across the country, and this is the first time everyone was there, right? And so I don't know. There's a way in which, I'm trying to take away that sort of thing too, including the newfound appreciation that I have for the people around me and in my life, right? Especially those who are abroad or far. It's like, actually, you know what? They aren't that far if you think about it now, right? So, yeah, that helps keep me up too. Pablo, if it's all right, I want to sort of segue, but folks in the chat, if you have any other things you want to address to Tara about this specific issue, please do. So, Pablo, one of the things I've been hearing is about the sort of environmental positives of the entire world sort of taking a break, right? This keeps coming up sort of time and time again, right? That nature's feeling a sigh of relief, or breathing a sigh of relief as we sort of let off of the accelerator a little bit. But I don't really know as much about this as someone like you might know. So first, just a basic question. Do you see something, does this feel right to you that this is like an environmental break that we all needed? And then we'll talk more about what sort of policies we think might emerge in the future after on the other side of COVID.
Yes, thank you. So the short answer is that yes, there is clear environmental impact, and it's positive. If you think about the fact that the use of fossil fuels has plummeted in Europe, in the US, in China. In China in particular, that also means the air is cleaner, which makes people's health a little better. So then there's a number of pollutant sources of pollution that actually are not happening right now. So the immediate impact of COVID-19 is actually positive for the environment. But this is not necessarily sustainable. As soon as we go back to normal, we're gonna be back where we were. So this is really not buying us anything. It's just a short break. If we really want the environmental positives that are happening now to actually be sustainable, you have to engage in intentional policy. This is just an accident.
And so I guess that's the next question for me right here is do you see any signs that the world's governments are taking notice that there are any number of policies and fairly simple things that this might sort of engender going forward? Again, I haven't seen any signs of this, but I'd like to think that folks are looking out and they're going, hey, we thought we couldn't get a handle on CO2 emissions, but here we are in a certain way. Are there any sort of policies that you see that could emerge to help this process along?
I'm not very positive about that. I think the key point here is that whether people are realizing that actually the air is cleaner, the water is cleaner. This is great. Let's make this the new norm. But in many parts of the world where this is happening, people are not allowed out. So they can actually see the sky from their windows, but they can't really spend a lot of time out. Here, even if you're locked up, we can go back to a yard. But in most places in China, in Europe, people don't have a yard. In New York, the only way to get out and take a deep breath and realize the air is cleaner is by just opening the window. Doesn't do the same. So there's been a number of discussions about the implications of this, but I think most of them are really happening only in academia. I think as far as policymakers go, they're just trying to get through this. They're really not thinking long-term about the environmental impact of this. They just focused on the health crisis.
All right.
So Tara has a question. Tara, go ahead and ask your question.
So I definitely have noticed the use of disposable and single-use things being like rampant right now because of fear, obviously. So I wonder kind of if that worries you, noticing that. But maybe the question I'm more curious about is the hand sanitizer. Like, I can't help but think about the hand sanitizer use now on surfaces as being kind of like, when the overuse of antibiotics was at its peak. And I'm worried about those sorts of long-term consequences. I was just curious to hear from you about that, Pablo.
Okay, the data that I've seen suggests that recycling has actually gone up by 40%. As people are spending more time at home, they're actually paying more attention to what they recycle. It's unclear why. I don't. I think a social psychologist would probably be better equipped to answer that. I haven't really found any meaningful arguments. I mean, one of them is people have so much time in their hands, they don't know what to do. So they're actually paying more attention to where they put things. Another argument is people, particularly in China, Europe, are only allowed out to take the trash. So they actually separate out so they can actually walk to different booths. There's the plastic, I'm gonna walk over to the glass, then I'm gonna go over to the bio. So those are all plausible hypotheses. At this point, they're only hypotheses. And we also don't have really solid data, to compare across. So we don't know if that's only happening in Europe. The data that I've seen is for Europe. I've been looking for equivalent data for the US, and I haven't found it. So as Americans are not really locked down in the way that the Europeans are, I wonder if they've experienced less of a change in their routines. I mean, they find ways to get out of the house so they don't feel that separating out, the recyclables is the way to go. As far as the question on the alcohol, etc., I haven't really looked into that. I don't really know about the impact of hand sanitizer. I think what's really interesting is, I'm really not answering your question, but I'm bringing something up that I've been following, is how many companies are actually converting from making X to making hand sanitizer or masks or respirators. So most of the companies that are doing this are not doing that out of their own will. They're doing that because of government mandates, because they do have the scale to actually produce this, but they're making it very clear, as soon as we go back to normal, we're done with this. We're not gonna do this. We don't know how to make a profit out of this. We don't have the people with the training to do this. So we're just getting by. We're getting all kinds of data information from the companies that actually do this, but they don't have the infrastructure to mass produce it. So there's a lot of question marks also about the quality of these things that we're asking General Motors to make. I mean, they don't make respirators. So they're basically consulting out, the process of making respirators to the companies that do, that don't have the capacity to make them. So they're giving them advice, helping them redesign their production facilities. But it's very clear that as soon as this is over, General Motors is going to go back to making cars. Very often, whenever there has been a crisis like this, we see that one, maybe two companies discover there is a new line of business here for us to explore, and they might do that. But I think based on the data that we have, everything suggests is that once we get through this, everybody's going to try to go back to normal.
There's an interesting, this reminds me, I listen to a lot of podcasts to keep myself sane too, and I'm an NPR junkie. Planet Money actually had an interview with a company that supplies parts to GM. They make little pistons for GM, and since GM was making this switch to making ventilators, they interviewed the CEO and some people of this company as a part of their podcast to talk about this, and they didn't talk at all about this question of the quality, right, or the how long they plan on producing this part, or what their thoughts are about long-term use. So it's a Planet Money episode that if you do have the chance to listen to, it's really, really interesting. They're definitely an economics podcast, but I got to listen to it again now, because when I was listening to it, I was like, I'm so glad that we've got people in the world who want to take care of each other. And then now I'm kind of like,
I mean, so I'm sort of the same, right? When I heard that there were these distilleries that were like, you know what, forget making, whiskey right now. We're going to switch over to making hand sanitizer. I'm like, see, that's the spirit. That's what we need. That's bringing us together, right? And maybe those companies are doing it. Most of those companies, to be fair, are relatively small companies, right? But the sort of large corporations you're talking about, I mean, I think that's think that's the most likely scenario. I think what gives me a little bit of a ray of hope is sort of the last thing that you said there, is that there are probably a couple of companies that are going to come out of this and say, hey, in the process, we actually discovered a more effective, efficient, or efficacious way of doing something. And we did see that with the introduction of some environmental policy in a number of countries, right? That once companies were forced, including in the United States, once companies were forced to care about things like, air quality or fuel efficiency, that they actually changed their manufacturing processes to be able to do this and to do things much more effectively. I want to go back for a second to the hand sanitizer issue that Tara raised. And Dara, thank you for sharing in the chat this article from the Japan Times that's talking about one of the possible side effects of the overuse of hand sanitizer. And I think that's probably where you're coming from, Tara, right? Is using too much of this hand sanitizer can actually damage our skin so much that we end up in a situation where the main barrier that we have to disease is all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, all the diseases, like let's move in. So is that what you're thinking, or?
Yeah, it was actually both that. I mean, kind of destroying that mantle on our skin that, we live in symbiosis with all of these microbacteria on our skin. But I was thinking from an environmental standpoint too, increasing the sterility of our environment at all times, it has not always proven to be a good thing. And so obviously there's a fine line to walk in there. And so I was just curious. I was actually almost thinking about it from like pesticide and herbicides and how that impacts food chains and, all of that, and thinking about it from that. The more of it we use, the more of it is going to end up in our water and our food and our soil and, the air. It was more just kind of something, just, trying to find a different thing to worry about every day. So that was my latest.
But Tara, I'm actually wondering though too, if you could dig a little bit into this role of the skin in the immune system, and why, like when we think, maybe you and I could talk about this a little bit, right? That one of the things that we're really thinking about is we want to keep our skin intact, right? And we've got that natural microbiome, but the skin is actually a part of what keeps us protected from this virus and other viruses in the first place, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think it has become easy to forget the wash your hands. If you can't wash your hands, use hand sanitizer.
Right.
I feel like that those two mandates have kind of gotten swapped, and that people here use hand sanitizer, wash your hands after you go to the bathroom. That's what I'm thinking. And the reason it's wash your hands is because what washing your hands does is, if you do it correctly with soap and with some scrubbing, you're washing things off, but you're not wiping things out. And that's what you want to do is, you want those things that live on your skin and work in concert with you to keep you healthy. You want those things to stay there. You don't want to completely wipe them out all the time. Use hand sanitizer when you can't wash your hands. Absolutely. Like that is where we are right now. But that just the washing of the hands comes first for a reason.
Right. No, I think it's you're very right that it's a very different thing, and actually removing the bacteria and the viruses from your hands, not just leaving the dead carcasses there too. It matters, and it sounds kind of gross, but
I like it.
So George had a comment, soap works better than sanitizer. If you look at my virus right behind me here, you'll note that it's got this gray bit. That's the viral envelope. For those of you chemistry nerds, these are amphipathic molecules that have a polar and a non-polar bit. And when you put soap in that, it disrupts this gray bit, and it basically makes the virus not be able to interact with your cells anymore. Your cells interact, or the virus interacts with your cells through the red bits. And so the soap actually, like detergents actually have a chemical effect on the virus in addition to washing it away. So we have a question from Gisela. Pablo, do you know anything about energy use impacts to the environment?
Yes, so energy use has actually fallen. The energy use at home, residential use has gone up, but the reduction in industrial use has actually gone down much more than the rise in residential. And that's what explains transportation is also a significant reduction. So the main sources of energy, the main most demand for energy is highest in the transportation sector and industrial sector, energy production as well. So all of those were down. So even if residential is up, residential, I think accounts for less than 10%. So I think that's up at about 30%. But you know, the reductions in all of the other big, you know, parts of the pie are really much more significant than the increase in residential. So in general, energy is way down.
So Pablo, I have a question related to that. This morning, when I was listening to the news, I heard that today, for the first day in 76, the first time in 76 days or so, Wuhan has the place where we first saw the real first outbreak of COVID-19. They are now releasing the lockdown. And I was wondering if you had some thoughts on what you expect to see in terms of energy usage. What are people in your area of expertise watching as we saw this 2-month suppression of movement, suppression of industry, like lockdown? And now, I mean, I heard this morning too that there were 55,000 people who bought train tickets to get out of Wuhan.
Right.
All right. So the first thing is that in the social sciences, we don't trust Chinese data at all. So people in my field are not really, we don't believe the data from China in terms of rates of infection, the number of people who tested positive, the number of deaths, and there's always different ways of looking around that to try to get a sense of what might actually have happened. And we believe that the number of people who died as a result of COVID-19 in China is somewhere around 2 million. And I can talk about, you know, statistics if anybody's interested with that. So with that, what should we expect to see in China was pretty much anything the Chinese government wants us to see, which is probably not going to be a very accurate picture of reality. The first thing that is going to happen is that there's going to be new outbreaks of COVID-19 in different parts of China, because there's lots of asymptomatic people who are now getting out of Wuhan. And China hasn't been testing all of those people, in part because demand for test kits has increased so much around the world that it's more profitable to sell them to the state of New York than to actually, you know, sell them to the city of Wuhan. So that is going to basically create a huge problem, because all of those people leaving Wuhan now, going back to the places where they actually work, are going to be carrying COVID-19 with them. Yeah. Will we know this? Yes. Will we have the most timely data on it? No. So we should be expecting outbreaks to start popping up again within 2 weeks in China, and we should be expecting the Chinese government to tell us that that is because of the Chinese students studying at the law college going back home. And I encourage you not to believe that, even if that might be the case, but that probably won't account for the thousands of infections that we'll see. As far as the economics goes, it is really, really hard to actually know the impact in China, because again, the Chinese government is always doctoring economic indicators. We should probably expect to see an increase in economic activity out of Wuhan, but you know, the extent to which China has been really hit by the crisis economically, it's very hard to explain, and every country is affected differently. I think we're better off, especially if you want to see how this is going to impact the US, we're better off looking at Italy and Spain, which are the two countries that have really had a very serious hit. And they're very transparent to the best of their ability, because definitely their data is not as good as it should be, but it's the best that they can produce. So I think what we see coming out of Italy and Spain is that the economic hit is absolutely gigantic. So all of that decline in the use of energy is normally a good proxy for economic activity. because a significant decline in energy over time doesn't mean because we have a few windmills coming into operation and doesn't come from the retirement of a fossil fuel power plant just because of that. That is a very big indication that the economy is really taking a nosedive. The number of people applying for unemployment benefits is also a very good indication of where the economy is going in those two countries, but also in the US. And I think those are a lot more useful cases for us to think about. And if you allow me to kind of build on that, one of the things we do in international relations is to always ask ourselves, you know, particularly as Tara mentioned, this is new to us. So one of the questions we always ask is where in the world have they been here before? And obviously COVID-19, it's China, but we can't, again, as I said, rely on China. So the best we can do is look at Italy and Spain. We're just 2 weeks behind and take it from there. But if we actually zoom out a little more, you know, what countries have expertise with these kinds of pandemics? And there we actually do have some very good case studies of countries that have been dealing with this for a quarter century. So one of the countries that has developed the most aggressive way to deal with pandemics is the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's one of the most populated countries in Africa. There has been a perennial civil war for a long time. They've had to deal with Ebola and pretty much what you know, public health officials call the diseases of poverty. Yeah. And their public health system has developed a very aggressive approach to prevent these outbreaks from getting out of control, just because they don't have the healthcare system to deal reactively with the problem. So one of the things that I'm trying to do with my McNair mentee in the fall is to actually look at how countries around the world are actually going to the Democratic Republic of Congo to actually bring people to Italy, to Spain, to France, to Germany as advisors to basically advise public health authorities on how to deal with this problem. And that is something that most of us don't think about. You know, where do you go when you're facing this problem in New York? Well, you should go to the Democratic Republic of Congo. They do these every 2 years. They definitely know what it takes. Whether they have the technology, the capacity is a different story, but they certainly know what it takes. And I think based on the cases of Ebola and other outbreaks, they've actually been able to bring them under control on very limited resources. So that is very important. And one final thing is a lot of these countries are being advised by Cuba. Cuba has a very aggressive foreign policy that relies very heavily on the export of public health expertise, know-how. So going back to 1959, there's about 170 countries in the world that have actually welcomed Cuban advisors, and the Democratic Republic of Congo has been one of those that reached out to Cuba whenever they needed to deal with these problems. So, so the credit has to be shared between the Democratic Republic of Congo, but also we're talking about Liberia, we're talking about Sierra Leone, and a few other countries that have gone through this, Nigeria, but also Cuban health officials. So there's a documentary that I strongly recommend you to watch if anybody's interested. I'll share that with through the text, and it's free. It's available through YouTube. So it makes for very interesting reading for anybody who's interested in public health policy in particular.
Yeah, that'd be great to share that. I think it's fascinating, or it's a really, really good point that Ebola pops up over and over and over again throughout history, since it was first really described in 1976. And you're right, they have been really effective at kind of tamping it down and catching those outbreaks and really limiting the spread. The difference being in the 2013 to 15 outbreak is that was primarily an outbreak outside of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and that really exploded for a lot of very different reasons, and in part because it was in cities and in a different environment. So we have two questions from the chat. The first one is, some experts suggest that it will take more than 10 years for the global economy to get back to normal. How true is this? What's your opinion on this? Is 10 years too long, too short? What are the ranges?
Well, I mean, I'll just say, I think that depends on us maintaining the idea that there is a normal that we're going to get back to. And I'm not saying that to be facetious. I mean, one, we're still in the middle of this. So we're not entirely sure exactly how long this will actually play out, right? If the numbers from China can be believed, then, if we extrapolate back to December when they first started dealing with this, and Pablo's like, no. but if, again, go with me on this hypothetical, right? Is that if that is the case, then we're looking at what, about 4 months, 4 months that, we still got a couple of months to go forward with it. But one of the things I think we have to consider is that there are any number of businesses that are kaput now, right? Small businesses, a good chunk of those small businesses aren't going to make it. Now, that's not to say that something else won't spring up in their place, but there's really no way of knowing like how this is going to impact folks. So, I mean, 10 years, maybe, but you think about something like Hurricane Katrina that, happened a long time ago, and there are still people dealing with the effects of that as well, right? So will the global economy get back to a strong footing? Yeah, but my equivalent is with normal. I don't know if it will return to normal. Hopefully it will move to something that's different and much more informed than what we had before.
I'm not an economist, put that out there. But I just kind of watching from the side, I think it will be really interesting, and I'm curious how different it will be from something like a Hurricane Katrina that was such a, in one specific location, horrible, but really, really hurt, these people in this place. And because this is hurting everyone all over the world, and I think we've already seen this give and take. I lost my job, but my landlord is going to let me go a couple months rent free. Like, you've seen this give and take because it's impacting everyone. It'll be interesting to me, again, with no background of economics, to see how that impacts the moving forward, both positively and negatively, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
So I want to make sure we've got about 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we get to these questions. We'll take the one on mass culture, and then we're going to hop back to George's question. But there's a little discussion going on in the chat right now. What are thoughts on mass culture? I've seen arguments stating that areas like South Korea, Japan, etc., have had more success in containing COVID due to heavy mask wearing culture when compared to countries like Italy, Spain, and the United States. And then a follow-up comment. There's in Japan, many of the masks are for blocking pollen and not viruses. And when I think about this mask that I've got for myself here, right, and we weren't encouraged to be wearing masks at first, and now the CDC has changed their guidelines, and this mask is not going to block viruses. So I'm wondering, Tara, if you can talk a little bit about some of the thinking about masks and maybe why the CDC is recommending them now, and what the point is, and how we can think about that.
So yeah, I'm following along kind of like everyone, and actually just went and read the CDC guidelines. I've seen it in listservs and on the news and all that, but I just went today and kind of read exactly what they were saying on wearing the mask. So I'm glad you asked me today. And they did specifically say it as in public. And I think they even, I'd have to look again, but I think they even said in public when you're near other people.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, good. And then on top of that, they kind of put another layer on it that said, especially in areas that have a high incidence of community acquired. And I'm not sure community acquired, I don't think I'm saying that correctly. But so it was interesting to me. I think it's a great idea. I mean, I kind of feel, I think it's the right thing to do. And I think what I struggle with, and I'll be curious to hear what you think about this, Rachel, too, is from what I understand, is at its scientific kind of core, this virus is still droplet, not airborne.
Yes.
Exactly.
And so I'm having trouble getting my logical brain of understanding what droplet precautions mean versus airborne precautions
Right.
to adjust to the way that we're thinking about this. And that is not at all saying that I'm against the wearing masks or anything like that. This whole thing has kind of been about taking what you logically know and then layering about 19 layers of fear and overreaction on it. And I don't say overreaction with a negative slant, even though it sounds weird not to. I just think that's the appropriate way. Ron and I have had this conversation before. It's like, there's two ways to react to things that we don't know where they're going and we don't know what they mean. We can't react normally because we don't know what that, we don't have enough information to react normally. So we can choose to underreact or overreact. Well, when you line those two choices up, there's only one choice. You have to overreact.
Yeah.
So is wearing masks going to prevent a lot of people from transmitting this virus? Possibly.
Possibly, yeah.
But why not wear them? Why not wear them?
And I think that, I think that one of the things that you've said in there is really important. I love this, you have two choices to overreact or underreact, and overreaction really is the only one that you should do. And George, we see you, I'll get you next. Because if you underreact, millions of people are going to die. I mean, that's really what's going to happen. I think one of the other things that you've pointed out in the way that you put that too is that it's preventing transmission from you. It's part of the CDC guidelines are a recognition that we've got many people who are asymptomatic carriers of the virus. And being asymptomatic, I mean, I could be carrying the virus right now. We don't have enough testing to know who is carrying it or not. And given that it is droplet, and that's the question of droplet versus aerosol and these precautions, there's different rules. The best way that I've heard droplets described most recently is the spit. Like you've got when you're talking and you spit, or when you cough or you sneeze. And the idea is that this isn't going to necessarily stop the virus from getting through, but what this is going to do is when I cough, it's going to keep most of my spit to myself, right? And so this idea of we're overreacting because we don't know, we're being overly cautious because we don't know who's got it. We don't know who's going to be spreading it. I make a comment every year in emerging diseases when I'm teaching about droplet versus aerosol, that the students in the front row of class are doomed, for example. So anyhow, so I think that I like the way that you've described that. George, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I've been reading about droplet sizes and the masks.
Yep.
And the masks are only going to stop the big droplets. But if you do a concentration calculation, the big droplets have 99.999% of the virus in them.
Sure.
Compared to the small droplets who have such a little volume that there's not much virus in it at all.
Right.
So is it going to stop everything? No, it's like a condom. It's not foolproof. But it makes a big difference.
99.9 is way better than a condom, just so
Okay.
we're clear.
Okay, so then
That's our other podcast, Tara.
This is even better.
Podcast.
This is why I was actually invited.
Yes. But I think
condoms are not 99% effective. Everybody listen.
yes.
Okay. Sorry.
No, another thing though, Tara, is that in the CDC guidelines, they're not just saying wear a mask, everything will be fine. They're saying wear a mask, continue social distancing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's remembering. So when we think about why, and we see you, Pablo, when the reason that we're doing this is a recognition that we can't, because of the way our lives are set up, we cannot stay at home all the time. My spouse does all of our grocery shopping. He's wearing a mask when he's going grocery shopping because we don't want to expose other people. Go ahead, Pablo.
Yeah, thank you. So I think that from what I've been reading, that there is no question that the mask makes a difference. But the reason why we are not being really strong about asking people, demanding that people wear a mask, is because if there's a run, then our medical professionals won't have them. And this has been the problem in Europe. And in Europe, they're very open about this. Everybody should, but we can't make it a requirement because we don't have enough. So, you know, you can't ask somebody to do something that don't provide the means. There is such demand for masks in the world right now that, you know, there is not enough supply. So basically, public health officials are walking a very thin line and trying to get you to read between the lines. Yes, of course you should wear a mask for your own safety and that of the people around you, but we can't require you to do that because we have to make sure we have enough supply for people who are actually at the front lines of the fight, and that's the medical professional. Those are the ones that should be getting, you know, the 95s and on all of the good ones. You know, you should make your own until we actually have enough of the good ones to give them to you. But in the meantime, do the best you can.
Yeah, and I think that part of you're right that it's not a requirement, and certain people have said that they will not be wearing masks in public, which I think is not a good idea given who those certain people are. Our president, for example. I think that we need strong examples of what it does mean to be wearing masks. And so anyhow, the CDC is saying something along the lines of cloth face covering too as well, Tara, that's correct?
Yeah, there's like 3 or 4, I think like 4 different patterns in there just on their website under it. And they're showing you how to make them with sewing and not sewing and folding and using this and using that. It was actually pretty cool. I was impressed.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of resources out there for helpful information. That one of the challenges is we don't have a really good study on how masks work, or like a really large systematic study. So they're not necessarily saying this is the best pattern for making a mask. Some of the things that have been said are, for example, if you can see through the fabric when you hold it up to the light, you see like spots of light coming through between the weave. That's not good fabric to use. They're saying this might mean nothing to many of you, but high quality quilting cotton with 180 threads per inch is what they're looking for, and doing a double layer of that. Another suggestion or another recommendation that I've seen is you can use a t-shirt fabric for it. If you put a piece of flannel between 2 pieces of t-shirt fabric, that's shown to be pretty good.
There's a pattern for that on the CDC website using an old t-shirt.
Yeah, and so there's also a nice pattern that I've seen around where you take a bandana and fold it and then put on some hair ties and kind of hook it around your ears. There's a lot of good patterns for that. So we could probably do an entire like 4 hours on masks. I'm thinking about doing a sew along for making your own mask for students. So maybe if I get my act together, I'll do that.
Well, and we need to have a conversation too when it comes to masks about what that means in social context as well. I mean, this is one of the growing concerns among many folks, right? Especially those who are on the receiving end of a great deal of racial profiling, right? You know, walking into a bank while Black and with a bandana on your face, right? Is another one of those issues that you know in some ways makes the CDC recommendations a little bit tone deaf, right? Like not everyone, just go home, just get a cloth and put it over your face and walk into your places, right? Like, okay.
Yeah.
So, and there are a growing number of people who are very concerned about this, right?
Yeah.
I have this sort of white masks that you often see. I have a bunch of those, so I don't worry so much about it. But, you know, I'm fortunate that I have that. I had that because I know someone who had some, right? I would not be comfortable walking in with the thing that I was going to use, which is the sort of black scarf thing that I have that sort of covers all this part of my face. So again, this is another one of those conversations where things are a little bit different in practice. Well, not a little bit, quite a bit different in practice than they are in sort of theory, right? So yeah, that's another conversation, especially that we're towards the end. There's a question here. I don't know if we have enough time, and maybe we can start up with this question next time. But the question is that since there is no vaccine for the virus and social distancing seems to be the new normal for quite some time, how will that affect fall semester, spring 2021, and what measures is Beloit College taking to prevent the spread on campus, considering that students will come from affected areas? I mean, I think there's a lot to talk about in this question, right? And I think a good deal of what we're hoping to do is still unfolding, right? We do have the COVID-19 task force as well, and I'm sure this is exactly what those folks are thinking about right now. And yeah, and Terry, you're one of those folks, right? So again, I know there's so much in this question, but is there any part of this you'd like to address in the couple minutes we have left?
I think the best answer I have is that every single thing that was brought up in that question is already being discussed.
Yeah.
And, you know, questions like exactly what does this mean for students coming back to campus when, you know, we don't know when exactly it's going to be safe, but as we should, hopefully we'll have students coming from all over the world and all over the country if it's safe for everyone to be on campus. And what is that going to mean at that point? Are some people going to have to come early to spend some time isolating? You know, certainly we hope not. But if that's the only way to get people on campus, that, you know, that might be something. So the good news is all of those things are being considered, you know, new student days and classes and people coming back, and when is that going to be and what does that mean, and all of those things. So all of that is being discussed not only in the task force, but I think in lots of areas on campus too.
Yeah, and I think that by this time next week, we might have more answers for that, and I think it would be reasonable for us to, as much as we're able to say anything about it, to continue bringing up this question on a regular basis as we move forward. So. So we're in our last minute or so, and I'd like to say a huge thank you to Pablo and Tara for joining us. This was really, really interesting to hear your thoughts on this. And so I'm gonna ask if you can stick around for a minute or two after we're done here. But as we leave, what are you looking forward to this week, Tara?
I'm starting our book club, our FactStat student book club. So I'm really excited about that. And just moving forward, things are picking up. I think there's more forward momentum and forward thinking, and it's fun to see people talking and thinking about the future of college and campus and classes and events and all of that. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Great. How about you, Pablo?
I've got two projects that I thought I would have accomplished 2 weeks ago. One is I want to make a chocolate cake. And the second one, I want to finish a book on gardening that I've been reading for 2 weeks now that I should have finished like in a day. But, you know, that's kind of like where I am these days. So those are my two projects for the week. If I accomplish both by the weekend, I'll be very happy.
That sounds like excellent projects. Ron, what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, you know, I realized there was a book that I wanted to start reading. Some of you may know the sci-fi series, The Expanse, and one of my friends, yeah, I see, exactly. That's the reaction I need from you. So, The Expanse, but I decided, and one of my friends, in fact, Matthew Taylor, some of you know who he is, encouraged me to go ahead and read the books as well. So I want to get started on one of those.
Excellent. And I've got 2 words for my week: Tiger King.
Whoa, no, not you too.
I know,
Rachel.
I know. My neuroscience class got me into it, but don't worry.
Oh, God.
We're watching The Expanse too, so.
Okay, then that balances out,
yeah.
sort of.
All right, well, thank you everybody so much.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
One thing I'd like to see out of this crisis is when I go to the supermarket to get hand sanitizer, and next to Purell, I find Jack Daniels. Wouldn't that be nice?
I mean, I can help you find that, Pablo, if you tell me when you want to go shopping.
Yeah, Ron and I will open that store.
We can do that. We're there. We're there for you.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week, 4 o'clock, and a special edition on Thursday. We already have one person confirmed for it. One alumni confirmed for it, and we'll have more. We'll send out emails and everything with details on that as soon as we have it. So thank you, everybody.
Take care, folks. So
Bye-bye.
Pablo and Tara, please stay around.
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands.